Thanks.
Just don't touch this button.
Well, good morning, everyone. This week we continue to move forward on a bold agenda, the bold agenda that we laid out at the beginning of the year. We are keeping our promises, whether it's creating jobs, growing our economy, repealing and replacing Obamacare, strengthening our national security. And an important piece, a foundation to national security is public safety. And as you see, we have a couple of guests here today, Representative Radcliffe and Representative Martha Roby, who have done some important work. When you hear the stories of Sarah and Kate and Grant, you'll be heartbroken the way that I was. And it's important that our cities and our states are working with the federal government to ensure that our streets are safe and people are secure. This is all part of our plan as we work together to keep the promises that we made. And whether it was last week, on Friday with the VA bill to make sure that our VA is accountable, the promises to roll back the unprecedented regulations that were imposed by the previous administration, our promise to dismantle Dodd-Frank and ensure that Main Street is strong and that our businesses can get the
that refuses to enforce our immigration laws. Consequences like the call I received last year telling me that 3 of my constituents, a 36-year-old fire captain by the name of Peter Hacking, his 4-year-old daughter, Ellie, his 2-year-old son, Grayson, were all killed in an accident caused by a previously deported illegal alien. Sadly, almost every member of Congress could relate a similar tragic story because when there's no deterrent to bad behavior, when there's no consequences for those who violate our laws or help them to do so, it happens over and over again. There's no story more tragic than that of Kate Steinle, who was gunned down in broad daylight a little over 2 years ago by an illegal alien who had previously been deported 5 times on 7 felony charges. So this week, the People's House is saying enough is enough. We are a nation of laws and we're going to enforce those laws. Kate's Law and the No Sanctuary for Criminals Act will be a deterrent effect for those who violate our immigration laws and those who try to help them to do so. And I'm grateful to have a president who is willing to work with this House to finally protect the American people and provide them with real compassion. Thank you.
Good morning. As a member of the Judiciary Committee and on behalf of my chairman, Goodlatte, I want to thank the Speaker and the Majority Leader and our conference chair for bringing to the floor some of the important legislation that we've been working on. As you know, Kate's Law is named after Kate Steinle, who was brutally and senselessly murdered by an illegal immigrant who had already been deported many times. Kate's Law raises the maximum sentences for criminal aliens who illegally re-enter the United States to create a true deterrent against those who persist in breaking our laws. The No Sanctuary for Criminals Act prohibits state and local government from implementing policies designed to help illegal immigrants avoid deportation by stopping the police from cooperating with federal immigration authorities. It also makes jurisdictions who break this law ineligible for certain Department of Justice grants and Homeland Security grants. Cities, counties, and states that refuse to cooperate with the federal agencies to enforce laws of this country should not be rewarded with taxpayer dollars intended to facilitate law and order. Sanctuary cities are magnets for illegal immigrants, including some dangerous people with criminal records. There are more than 140 jurisdictions and 6 states actively obstructing enforcement of federal immigration laws with sanctuary policies. This practice puts Americans at risk, and I believe the federal government should do all it can to discourage it. We are working with the Trump administration and keeping our promises to make America safer.
Read the letter. Oh. Good morning, all. I do want to thank Congressman Radcliffe and Congresswoman Roby for their work in committee to continue to look at keeping America safe and Americans. That's why this week, as they talked about on the floor, we'll have Kate's Law and No Sanctuary for Criminals Act. I also want to do one thing and highlight what passed the substantial bill to pull Americans out of welfare and into work. Through this process, Americans will require the skills needed to pursue a fulfilling career. But what I want to note on that was the vote. It was very bipartisan, 377 to 34. I also want to know later that day that President Trump signed a major VA reform bill into law. This just proves the commitment. We had passed it last Congress, the change in administration, be able to move it through a Senate, and now have a president sign it. One thing that everybody's been trying to work on, too, is reforming the VA. Successes are happening. The successes last week for welfare reform, and then the VA, and this week, keeping Americans safe. We will continue to do our job.
Keeping Americans safe is the highest priority of our government. That, more than anything, is what these enforcement bills are all about. This is about protecting law-abiding citizens and getting criminals off our streets, plain and simple. We are not just dealing with a problem of lax enforcement or looking the other way. This is a flagrant disregard for the rule of law, and it's putting American lives at risk. Families want to know that their communities are safe. They deserve to know that. As you just heard, the members of our Judiciary Committee, Martha Roby, John Ratcliffe, they've taken a long look at this. They've heard testimony from law enforcement officials. What do we need to do to keep people safe? And they've heard the heart-wrenching stories of the families that have been hurt by these crimes. So this week, we will take up responsible legislation to protect public safety. These enforcement administrations and these enforcement initiatives deserve the House's strong support. Look, we cannot bring back those that we lost. What we can do, what we must do, is take action to protect public safety and prevent these senseless crimes. That is why the President made a promise to act. And that is why we have made a promise to act. We must enforce our laws. We must keep our citizens safe. And that is what the House is doing this week. Does anybody have any questions? Jonathan.
Given some of the complaints we're hearing from the Senate side,
What? Complaints from the... We never get complaints from the Senate side.
actually not about you guys, but about
No, I stand corrected, sir.
the CBA.
Market. So I believe that they'll get this done, and I believe they'll get it done because they said they would get it done. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, are you taking the temperature of your members while this debate goes on in the Senate, particularly the Freedom Caucus? Are you getting their impressions of the changes as this goes along, or are you just going to wait until the final bill?
Yeah, we just don't know what the final bill is going to look like. So all of our members are just waiting and seeing what the Senate does. We all have opinions on what the best possible policy is. And yes, the reconciliation system's a little frustrating because we can't put all the bills in there we would want. We're doing medical liability reform later this week, for example. But our members are just waiting to see, in a constructive way, what the Senate can produce, and then we'll make the decision after they do that. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.